Senator Hoylman?
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Does the sponsor have any basis of fact in the statement he just said, that he thinks it's going to be a higher turnout in August? What statistics, factual data is he pointing to?
Common sense, Mr. President.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Sponsor yields. Members, please.
I'd argue that most common sense is rooted in fact.
Are you asking a question?
I am,
Senator
sir. Would the sponsor continue to yield for another
Sponsor
question?
yields. Please direct.
Is the sponsor aware that statistics show that 36% of the U.S. population actually take their summer vacations in August? Is he aware of that fact?
More take it in June.
I think more people take their vacation in June, Mr. President.
Through you, Mr. President. Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Sponsor yields. Again, I'm going to caution the membership.
Is the sponsor aware that the same study showed that actually only 11% of Americans take their vacations in June?
Nor do I care.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Certainly.
Sponsor yields.
Does the sponsor know what the voter turnout was in New York in 2014?
Mr. President, I'm not clear on that statistic either. I'm guessing my colleague's going to give it to me.
Senator Hoylman.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Sponsor yields.
Does the sponsor know that in 2014, New York had the fourth lowest voter turnout in the country at less than 30%, a civic embarrassment, as many commentators noted?
I think, Mr. President, this is why I'm excited about consolidating the election process, so we can get more people out to vote.
Would the sponsor continue to yield, Mr. President?
Certainly.
Sponsor yields.
Through you, Mr. President, again, does the sponsor have any basis in fact to make the assertion that voter turnout will in fact increase in August under this proposed plan?
I would have to refer to my earlier comment about common sense.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Mr. President, I'm happy to yield if we could talk about something about the bill or outside of statistical analysis.
Senator Hoylman.
On the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Hoylman on the bill.
I think, Mr. President, the sponsor has accurately summed up my concerns about this legislation. It seems that facts don't matter. You can point to something, you can pull a figure out of the air and assert merely that voter turnout will increase under this proposed plan, but there's no basis in fact for that. In fact, just the opposite, as we discussed. More New Yorkers will be away in June, but even more will be away in August. August is called the dog days of summer for a reason, and that's because people aren't around. And it's not just people headed for vacation homes. As my colleague pointed out, it's seasonal workers, it's families with school children, it's folks who have a break and may not be available to cast a vote. Mr. President, my concern is that we aren't doing anything in this chamber to increase voter turnout. We're pulling dates out of the air. We have no basis in fact to support them. We're ignoring a judge's recommendation, and we're not working with the other house. Talk about gridlock. Talk about common sense. Common sense would be to march over to the Assembly, to have a public hearing, to hash out the differences that both chambers have on a date, and to come here with a bill that everyone can support. Passing one House bills is not common sense, Mr. President. Passing one House bills is evidence of gridlock. That's not what New Yorkers want. This bill is a fig leaf, a fig leaf that we can present to our constituents back home and say, yeah, we're saving the state $25 or $50 million, but the bill didn't pass. And guess what? Most of those voters don't even know. You can put it in your newsletter, but we know better here, Mr. President, that this is not a realistic proposition, that we have a viable date that the Assembly supports, and that we should be working in tandem with them. We should be holding public hearings. We should be looking at the facts and the statistics. We should be consulting with good government groups and experts on how to increase voter turnout, not picking a date out of the air that will in fact do the opposite. I'll be voting no, Mr. President.
Senator Stavisky.
President, would the sponsor yield for a couple of questions?
Certainly.
Senator yields.
I want to pick up on something that was said a moment ago, the fact that people are taking their vacations in June. Are the children in Broome County in school in June, or are they, is that part of their vacation period?
Senator, you know what? I think this is a good bill that's going to consolidate the election process and save municipalities money.
Senator Stavisky.
President, will the sponsor yield?
Sponsor yields.
Yes.
That's not really what I was asking. I was asking whether the end of when school ends in your district.
Mr. President, that's my answer to my colleague's question.
All right. Totally different issue. What is if the sponsor will yield for another question?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
What is the effective date on this legislation?
Immediately.
Will the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Would this legislation impact elections for this year?
Yes.
In other words, if the sponsor would continue to yield?
Yes.
This legislation would require a primary in August for this election cycle.
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill.
Senator Stavisky on the bill.
For all of the reasons that Senator Hoylman and Senator Gianaris have outlined, I think this is not the solution. I think we have a better solution, and that would be Senator Stewart Cousins' version, which I think is a better answer, where families can spend their time with their children when they do go on vacation, not abandon them and just take off in June. This, I think, is a bad idea, and I will vote no.
Senator Gianaris.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the sponsor yield?
Sponsor yields.
Mr. President, did I understand the sponsor correctly earlier that he had no interest in considering data and statistical analysis as it relates to a debate on this bill?
Of course not. I simply said that I was listening to my constituency and municipal leaders that I represent.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Sponsor yield.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So let me just, so I'm crystal clear. I thought I heard earlier when Senator Hoylman asked the sponsor to yield, the answer was only if we're not discussing statistical analysis and we're discussing the bill.
I think it was pertinent to how and what he would yield to, but he did answer the question, Senator Gianaris. So what is your question?
My question is that still his position? Would he not consider a discussion of statistical analysis as it relates to this bill?
I'd be happy to have that discussion.
Okay, so Senator Hoylman, would you like to re-engage on statistical analysis? Yeah.
Senator Gianaris.
I yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Latimer.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill,
Senator Latimer on the bill.
there is no rational reason to vote for this bill, period, exclamation point. I respect what my colleague had to say. The constituents that I've spoken to cannot wrap their heads around that we would be willing to put primaries in the middle of August when people are on vacation, kids are out of school, and the likelihood of finding a certain percentage of people home is as low as it is. They would not understand at all why we would have a primary date at a time when the weather is generally pretty miserable. Late August is among the most worst temperature times, and June is much more temperate. And there's no reason to vote for this bill if you look at what we've said before. Some of my colleagues have pointed out that a federal judge has already opined having looked at the options of going to August or other dates, have picked a date in June. We would be coordinating with that date that has already passed muster from the judiciary. I heard comments that relate to, we want to do our work and pass our budget on time. Yes, indeed. We pass our budget by March 31st, not by June 31st. I've heard us say that the people that I represent are the people that have dialogued with me, but there's 63 districts in this state, and there's a variety of people that live in urban districts, live in rural districts, and live in suburban districts, and we ought to find out what are the impacts in each of those parts of the state before we gladly pass a bill like this. We have a bill on the table that's been passed by the Assembly. We have a proposed bill by Senator Stuart Cousins. That makes logical sense. And by having that primary done in June, the argument over our legislative schedule, which affects 200 some odd elected officials and our staffs, can easily be adjusted by the way we deal with our calendar here. Nothing prevents us from, at the end of the budget season on March 31st, to get everything else done in 1 month. You know how much time we waste in this legislature, both houses, during this ramp-up time. We waste time in February, leading to March. We basically buzz off the month of April, waiting to get to something that usually happens the last 2 weeks of June. We could just as easily make that the last 2 weeks in April if it was necessary, and then come back after the primary in July if there was something that was urgent that had to be dealt with. So I hear the analysis of it. Many times I say this, I understand where the votes are, but we're not going to accomplish anything today except make voters around this state wonder what the heck are they thinking putting a primary in August. With that, I will vote no.
Senator Hoylman.
President, would the sponsor yield to a few questions on statistics?
Yes.
Sponsor will yield.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President, does the sponsor know how many states hold their primaries in June?
I'm not entirely sure, Mr. President, but I do know that 14 other states in this great nation have their primaries in August.
Senator Hoylman.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Has the sponsor examined voter turnout and compared it to states that have primaries in June versus primaries in August?
Mr. President, I think what I'd like to do, if my distinguished colleague would be so kind, is I'd like to take all of his statistical data in my office and take it into consideration instead of having these statistical conversations on the floor of this great House, because we haven't, as I've said, I haven't reviewed this statistical data that he speaks of.
Are you willing to do that, Senator Hoylman, to discuss that with the member?
Mr. President, does that mean the sponsor will take the bill off of the floor today so we can review data and as he
indicated
suggested?
that he would be willing to have further conversations with you to consider any potential amendments.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor will yield.
Would the sponsor be willing to take the bill off the floor and discuss the data, looking at the statistics, looking at voter turnout, because I know the sponsor wants the same thing I do, a big voter turnout in our primaries.
I respectfully decline my colleague's offer.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So can the sponsor explain to me what the benefit of discussing the statistics that I've mentioned after we've already voted on the bill?
Well, Mr. President, as I've indicated, in coming to this determination, I've talked to the people that I represent, municipal leaders, people from the State Board of Elections. There are 14 other states in this great nation that have their primaries in August, and this is why we're moving the bill forward. So I'm not entirely sure what my colleague's question was.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Sure.
Sponsor yields.
My question is, why would we discuss the improving this bill and looking at statistics after having already voted on it?
Because Mr. President, I have a willingness to educate myself on issues. I've educated myself on this issue. I know that this bill ensures the fair treatment for military personnel. It saves municipalities money, and it draws a very clear distinction between the political season and legislative activities. I'll go back to my earlier point. The people that we represent in this great state expect us to be in Albany expect us to be doing their work between January and June. This date is the closest to the date now in September. People are accustomed to voting in September, and that's my position on the issue.
What do you mean? Would the sponsor continue to yield?
I think I'm all through, Mr. President.
Would you like to speak on the bill?
On the bill,
Senator Hoylman?
I wanted to thank the sponsor for at least answering some of my questions. I guess we'll be convening in his office after we've already voted. It doesn't seem to be a very common sense approach to passing good legislation. I think the common sense approach, again, Mr. President, is working with our colleagues on both sides of the aisle, having public hearings, engaging with the public. The fact of the matter is, my colleague just doesn't, in passing this bill, we're not just concerned about his constituents, we're concerned about the entire state of New York. We are here, and we bear the solemn responsibility to represent the entire state. So it is of the utmost importance that we weigh legislation like this incredibly serious. We should be looking at automatic voter registration. We should be looking at early voting and voting by mail. The goal is to increase turnout, not to hold primaries in the dog days of summer. Once again, Mr. President, I appreciate the sponsor answering some of my questions. I'm disappointed he wouldn't take them all, but I'll still be voting no. Thank you.
Senator Squadron.
Very much. Would the sponsor yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
I appreciate that. I know we've had a fair amount of conversation on this, but I do think there are further questions to answer. Just so that I understand the accustomed argument that we've heard today, does the sponsor feel that at some point in the future, after we've had many years of the divided primaries and the $50 million waste that comes with that, at some point in the future, voters may have become accustomed sufficiently to the June primary that we could align it there? And if so, what year would that be?
Mr. President, I have no idea what year that would be.
The sponsor will continue to yield.
Yes.
But the sponsor does agree that at
The
some
sponsor
point...
yields. Senator Squadron, please direct to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you. So the sponsor does agree that at some point in the future, people will be sufficiently accustomed for us to come to agreement on a June primary.
I didn't say that, Mr. President.
The sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
Does the sponsor feel that at no point in the future people will be sufficiently accustomed for a June primary?
Mr. President, what the sponsor feels is that, I'm going to reiterate my point again, that this bill advances democracy, it saves taxpayers money, it calls for the fair treatment of our military personnel, and it calls for the clear separation between the political season and our legislative responsibilities.
If the sponsor will continue to yield.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
I noted in Senator Hoylman's excellent questioning that 36% of folks take vacations in August. I was actually surprised to hear this. 36% of people take vacations in August, and 11%, I believe, take vacations in June. My sense was that the sponsor was also surprised by that really quite significant statistic. Just to be absolutely clear here before we go ahead and vote on this one House bill, does that statistic not change the sponsor's view over the likelihood of driving voter turnout in August versus June?
Does not change my position, Mr. President.
Great. If the sponsor will continue to yield.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Just to make sure we're clear on it, the sponsor agrees with the analysis that it would be about a $50 million a year savings to align the primaries?
Mr. President, my understanding is it's $25 million, but I mean, that's my understanding.
Thank you. If the sponsor continue to yield.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Let's say it was $25 million. Does the sponsor know how much money is saved by passing a one House bill?
My guess is none.
Thank you. On the bill, Mr. President.
Senator Squadron on the bill.
And I thank the sponsor for continuing to answer questions. I know it can be a tedious process, but The process of having bills on the floor and having questions asked and answered is an important one in this House. It's one many of us have suffered through, and so I really do appreciate the sponsor's willingness to continue doing that. I think the sponsor's point is correct. One House bill saved the state no money. They cost the state money. Cost the state money in introduction, in the paper that's used for the press release after they pass, but they saved the state no money at all. And that's the problem here at its core. I think that we saw some statistics from Senator Hoylman that suggest this will not have the desired effect, the stated desired effect of increasing turnout, but it also won't have the stated desired effect of saving money and aligning the primary dates. We have some folks accustomed to going out in June if they've had congressional primaries in the last couple of years. Some folks accustomed to going out in September. Not nearly enough folks accustomed to going out in either because of arcane election laws and registration laws that we have in this state that have been blocked in this House. And what we should be doing is we should be figuring out how to save that money, as the sponsor said, for our constituents now. They don't care about this debate. They care about us wasting their money in ways that lead to increase in their taxes and their property taxes. And we should do it in a way that maximizes turnout as part of a broader set of reforms that makes it easier for folks to vote. So that's why this bill, unfortunately, is a no today. I think the Assembly is still in session, so we do have an opportunity to start that conversation in a way that could pass both houses. The clock is ticking with the congressional primary coming up in June, but I hopefully it can get done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Comrie.
On the bill, Mr. President,
Comrie on the bill.
so I want to agree with my colleagues on most of their sentiments on the need to ensure that we increase voter turnout in a state that has the least voter turnout, that one of the least voter turnouts in the country. I disagree. I think that June is a primary and one of the best months to hold an election because there are so many things that are happening during the month of June. Parents are engaged, people are engaged during that month. There are a lot of public participation in other events in June. I think August is one of the least effective times to hold anything. People are on vacation, schools are closed, people are away from where they're being, college students are working to just get into school, moving out of the state, oftentimes to go away to get educated. Many people are also going away to work or going away to explore opportunities to increase their educational opportunity with out-of-state and out-of-the-country opportunities. We need to be focused on making voting easier. We need to be focused on making voting more modernized and accessible to New Yorkers. This August proposed primary date has not been inclusive, as the sponsor has said. There's not been a public hearing on this. I think one of the most critical issues that we need to do to engage New Yorkers is to have a public discussion about when would be the most effective date to hold an election. So while I understand the intent of the good senator, I understand that we all need to understand that we need to make voting more accessible to all New Yorkers. And by holding a date in the middle of the summer to ask people to come out to an election is something that doesn't make sense. I think our calendar, legislative calendar, is not beholden to just June. We could come back here at any time during the year and complete our legislative calendar. I think in some respects, our legislative calendar needs to be changed with additional dates to be put on it so that we could have more public discussion on those issues and concerns that are coming before New Yorkers and not have closed hearings or closed votes without having the opportunity to hear from the public. I believe that we need to make sure that the public has an opportunity to opine on these issues in the Senate, in the chambers, in the hearing rooms, or even throughout the state with public hearings, especially on an issue where we're trying to increase voter turnout and voter participation. I'll be a no vote on this, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Seeing and hearing no other senator that wishes to be heard, the debate is closed and the secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 18, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Addabbo, Flanagan, Klein, Stewart, Cousins, Young.
Senator Croce to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I heard a very lively debate on this bill today. And the reason that we are able to have that lively debate are because of the men and women who are currently serving overseas in uniform. These are the individuals that give us the right to stand in this chamber today in safety and have these conversations. So I compliment my colleague for giving those men and women overseas the opportunity to be part of the electoral process in our country. As somebody who has cast a ballot overseas on foreign soil for President of the United States, I can tell you it's a surreal experience. And I know there are other members in this chamber and in the other chamber who have done the same. So I appreciate the ability that men and women will now have to be part of the entire voting process, and hopefully their ballots make it back in time. I also heard discussion of the using of New York State driver's licenses to register individuals to vote. Currently, New York State is one of only 4 states or jurisdictions not to be compliant with the Federal Real ID Act. The Federal Real ID Act came out of the 9/11 Commission's recommendations, a bipartisan commission which recommended ways we could protect ourselves in New York and around the country. So I'm hoping that any discussions we have on this topic involve first New York becoming compliant with federal law before we seek to use our licenses for anything other than driving. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be voting aye on this.
Senator Croce to be recorded in the affirmative. Senator Bonasek to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the sponsor for putting this bill forward. 14 other states have done it, so there's an intelligence behind the bill. There's knowledge of results on the bill. And the major argument I've heard as to why this is a bad idea is because there are more people around in June than in August. But what's happening in this country in primaries, and I've been through them, is that the voter turnout is poor in primaries, whether it's June or August. And why is that? Because voters are losing confidence in the government. That's why. And to vote is a privilege. To vote is a privilege, and you have to do things to exercise that privilege. You have to go in either June or August if you have an interest in government and seeing state policies. So I would be more concerned. I've heard the arguments, and I would say to you that the military accommodation, the savings of money, there's intelligence to this vote. And the criticism that it's a one-house bill, how many bills have we done that started on both sides of the aisle that are one-house bills? And they've been around 2, 3, 4 years, and they could become law, and they do become law. So the knock on a one-house bill was a cheap shot against the sponsor. So I thank the sponsor. I vote aye, and you will see a larger turnout, like you're seeing in the presidential elections in South Carolina, where there's doubling the votes in primaries, because now we're having people that inspire voters. And if you get people that inspire voters, you'll have more turnout in primaries instead of trying to make voting a lot more easier and creating opportunities for voter fraud. I vote yes. Thank you, Mr. President.